Please be seated. My name is David Nuremberg. I'm the new Dean of the Divinity School. And on behalf of the Divinity School faculty, and together with the entire Swift Hall community, it's my pleasure to welcome you, graduates, family members, friends, current students, to this special graduation ceremony in the Divinity School, held in conjunction with the 531st convocation. William Rainey Harper, who was the first president of the University of Chicago and whom we constantly cite as our founding president, believed that we should have 4 convocations a year, 4, I won't call them graduations, 4 gatherings to recognize the work of our students who had finished their significant accomplishment. So we're at our 531st, which might make you think we're as old as Cambridge, Oxford, Salamanca, Bologna, and Paris. Now, until recently, the practice was to have these 4. Now we have only 1, so we're all gathered here for everyone who's graduated in any of these quarters. As a we may not be as old as Paris, but we do have traditions we hold very dear, and the dearest one is this ceremony that we hold here on the quasi-sacred grounds of Swift Hall to honor our graduates and to celebrate the well-earned and hard-earned accomplishments. We're glad to see you here at this place and at this auspicious moment. Thank you for coming. Now, joining me on the podium today are members of the Divinity School faculty and the broader university faculty. And I'm pleased to introduce, please stand as I call your name, but I will abbreviate titles because we have a very distinguished faculty with a long list of titles. Paul Cheney, Professor of European History in the Department of History. Ryan Coyne, Associate Professor of the Philosophy of Religions and Theology. Christine Culp, Associate Professor of Theology and Dean of the Disciples Divinity House. Wendy Doniger, Mircea Eliade Distinguished Service Professor of the History of Religions. Paul Mendes Flor, Dorothy Grant McLear Professor of Modern Jewish History and Thought. Sarah Hammerschlag, Associate Professor of Religion and Literature, Philosophy of Religions and the History of Judaism. Kevin, I won't abbreviate too much. Kevin Hector, Associate Professor of Theology and of the Philosophy of Religions. Heather Keenlyside, Associate Professor of English, Department of English Language and Literature. Bruce Lincoln, Caroline E. Haskell, Distinguished Service Professor Emeritus of the History of Religions in the Divinity School. Cynthia Gano-Lindner, Director of Ministry Studies and Clinical Faculty for Preaching and Pastoral Care. Richard Miller, Laura Spellman Rockefeller Professor of Religious Ethics. Omar McRoberts, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology. Margaret M. Mitchell, Shaler Matthews Professor of New Testament and Early Christian Literature. Wilhelmine Otten, Professor of Theology and the History of Christianity. Richard Rosengarten, Associate Professor of Religion and Literature and Visual Culture. Susan Schreiner, Professor of the History of Christianity and Theology. William Schweiker, Edward L. Ryerson, Distinguished Service Professor of Theological Ethics. Michael Sells, John Henry Barrows Professor of Islamic History and Literature. And Jeffrey Stackert, Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible. It's my special pleasure to introduce my colleague, Joshua Eagleson, Dean of Students in the Divinity School, who will add his words of greeting.
Thank you, Dean Nuremberg, and welcome to our graduates, your families, friends, and loved ones on this very special day. This ceremony is my first as Dean of Students, and so it is a particularly special one. I join with Dean Nuremberg, all of the faculty and staff, and the many people who have supported you on your journey in celebrating with you as together we mark this major milestone in your life. You have each worked hard and diligently to arrive at this day, and we are all so very proud of your accomplishments. Savor the moment. I also want to add that many people here have given of their time and talents to make this ceremony possible. And in particular, I want to thank my colleagues in the Dean of Students Office, America Huckabee, and Associate Dean of Students, Anita Lumpkin, as well as Sarah Bigger, Barbara Palmer-Bostick, Taryn Wine, Bill Gerasi, and Associate Dean Sandra Peppers, who have all been instrumental in arranging the many details of today's events. Let me conclude by inviting you to join us after the recessional on the first floor for a festive reception. Even the life of the mind requires physical sustenance. When we get to the recessional, I would ask that you please remain in your seats until the faculty and graduates have processed out, and there will be ushers to direct you downstairs. We also ask that you do that expeditiously, as we need to reset the room for our master's ceremony, which will begin at 1 p.m. Again, welcome and congratulations.
The Divinity School has been the graduate professional school for the academic study of religion since the founding of the university in 1891, and it has always been at the very center of the university, in fact, a physically literal center. The school educates students in the profession of studying and speaking in an intelligent, knowledgeable, critical, rigorous, and honestly engaged way about religion, an incredibly important topic to humanity that is not always spoken of using those adjectives, not always spoken of intelligently, knowledgeably, critically, rigorously, or in an engaged way. Swift Hall has been and is host to a conversation from the widest possible range of perspectives and interests in the study of religion and its many manifestations, past and present, all set within a great research university, if I may boast about the University of Chicago, that is the University of Chicago, with its defining values of critical thinking and advancement of knowledge so that, in our words of our motto, human life may flourish. Each of our graduates has contributed to that flourishing, producing an original and independent and important work of scholarship on religion. We shall now proceed to honor each of our graduates. This year, we happily have an unusually large number, which is why we have divided the ceremony into two. This afternoon, we recognize 24 doctoral graduates who earlier today were awarded the degree of Doctor of Philosophy by the Board of Trustees and the university and welcomed into this honorable company of scholars. These doctorands have completed a rigorous course of study in one of the 11 areas of specialization of the Divinity School, including extensive coursework, examination in many languages, both ancient and modern, comprehensive written and oral qualifying exams, and the research and writing of a dissertation that has been approved by the faculty of committee in their field of study as a substantial and original piece of research. They are trained as professionals, as research scholars and teachers and educators in the academic study of religion. It's my honor to present you with the diplomas you have earned. These doctorands have not only gone in pursuit, but they have found scientia. The PhD degree is a research degree only received when the candidate has made an original contribution to knowledge, to humanistic knowledge. We wish to recognize that by sending them forth with a gift from Swift Hall, the hood that they now have the right and the privilege to wear, which uniquely marks them as a Doctor of Philosophy graduate of the University of Chicago Divinity School. So, students, please remain seated and stand only when your name is called. We'll now present diplomas and hoods to the Doctor of Philosophy graduates. I will be assisted by members of the faculty who have served as advisors on their doctoral dissertation.
Halim Chalish, hooded by Professor Michael Sells.
Program of study in Islamic Studies, doctoral dissertation entitled Akbari Hermeneutics in Shams ad-Din's Al-Fanari's Quran commentary on the chapter Al-Fatiha.
Daniel Allen Yingst, hooded by Professor Wilhelmine Otten.
Program in the History of Christianity, dissertation entitled Towers in the Mud, Honorius Augustodunensis through the Lens of Pedagogy.
Crystal Ann Clayville, hooded by Professor William Schweiger.
Program in Religious Ethics, dissertation entitled Responsible Hermeneutics, Creation and Law in the Environmental Ethics of Hans Jonas and Holmes Rolston.
Brett Daniel Colasaco, hooded by Professor Richard Rosengarten.
Program in Religion, Literature, and Visual Culture, dissertation entitled Robinson Jeffers, Poet at the End of the World.
Julius Crump, hooded by Professor Kevin Hector.
Program in Theology, dissertation entitled At the Limits of God Talk, Publics, Politics, Conversations.
Allison Tyner Davis, hooded by Professor Richard Rosengarten.
Program in Religion, Literature, and Visual Culture, dissertation entitled Troping Protestant Desire, Patterns of Time and Space in 19th Century American Religious History.
Mary Emily Brielle Duba, hooded by Professor Kevin Hector.
Program in Theology, dissertation entitled God is Here, a Theology of Place and Displacement.
Andrew Francis Durden, hooded by Professor Bruce Lincoln.
Program in the History of Religions, dissertation entitled Redescribing Magic, Discourse, Alterity, and Religion in the Roman World.
Leanne Marquis Feldman, hooded by Professor Jeffrey Stackert.
Program in Biblical Studies, dissertation entitled Story and Sacrifice, Ritual Narrative and Priestly Source.
David N. Gottlieb, hooded by Professor Paul Mendez-Flor.
Program in the History of Judaism, dissertation entitled Second Slayings, The Binding of Isaac, Interpretations of Sacrifice, and the Formations of Midrashic Memory.
Nora Jacobson Ben-Hamed, hooded by Professor Michael Sells. You want to take that?
Program in Islamic Studies, dissertation entitled Knowledge and Felicity of the Soul in Fakhr al-Din al-Razi.
Andrew Mark Langford, hooded by Professor Margaret Mitchell.
Program in Biblical Studies, dissertation entitled Diagnosing Deviance, Pathology and Polemic in the Pastoral Epistles.
Junyan Lee, hooded by Professor William Schweiger.
Program in Religious Ethics, dissertation entitled Reclaiming Love in the Face of the Void in Iris Murdoch's Thought.
Ekaterina Nikitina Lomperes, hooded by Professor Susan Schreiner.
Program in Theology and History of Christianity, dissertation entitled Human Bodies in Spain in Pain as Spiritual Battlefields, Illness, Medicine, and Healing in Early Modern and Contemporary Christian Thought.
David Patrick Lyons, hooded by Professor Paul Mendez-Flor.
Program in the History of Christianity, dissertation entitled Philosophy, Politeness, and Party, David Hume and the Constitution of a Modern Social Order.
Catherine Elizabeth Mershon, hooded by Professors Richard Rosengarten and Heather Keenlyside.
Program in Religion, Literature, and Visual Culture, dissertation entitled Canine Redemption Narratives in the American Imaginary, 1981 to 2001.
Jawad Anwar Qureshi, hooded by Professor Michael Sells.
Program in Islamic Studies, dissertation entitled Sunni Tradition in an Age of Revival and Reform, Saeed Ramadan al-Bouti, 1929 to 2013, and his interlocutors.
Miriam Runeau, hooded by Professor William Schweiger.
Program in Theology, dissertation entitled Toward a Global Humanistic Theology, Constructing Moral Concepts of God.
Sunit Sarvaj Singh, hooded by Professor Wendy Doniger.
Program in History of Religions, dissertation entitled Echoes of Freedom, Radical Indian Thought and International Socialism, 1905 to 1920.
Jordan Eugene Skornick, hooded by Professor Jeffrey Stackard.
Program in Biblical Studies, dissertation entitled Paradigms and Possibilities on Literary Prophecy in the Hebrew Bible.
Willa Cornelia Swenson Lengel, hooded by Professor William Schweiger.
Program in Religious Ethics, dissertation entitled The Future of Hope on Climate Inaction and Moral Agency.
Dilara Kadriye Uskup, hooded by Professor Omar McRoberts.
Program in Theology, dissertation entitled Sex in God's City, Theology as Political Persuasion.
And finally, R.L. Watson, hooded by Professor Richard Rosengarten.
Program in Religion, Literature, and Visual Culture, dissertation entitled Children of Darkness, Children of the Mask, an examination of the moral effects of metaphors of darkness on the representational lives of Black Americans. To the audience, please rise and join me in another round of applause for our 2018 Doctoral graduates. It is a special pleasure to present the university's Graduate Teaching Award to Professor Susan Schreiner. Susan, please step forward while I read the citation written by our colleague Bill Schweiker. Susan Schreiner is a leading figure in the field of the history of Christianity. She has mentored generations of scholars who hold positions at universities and colleges around the country. Her passion for ideas and dedication to teaching have evoked trust, care, and enduring friendship from her students. They marvel at her lectures on the history of thought and seek to carry on her manner of scholarly thinking. Her groundbreaking scholarship on doubt and the search for certainty in the early modern era, nature and the natural order, and medieval and modern perspectives on Calvin's exegesis of the Book of Job have broadened the study of the Renaissance and the Reformation. Her teaching and research cast new and profound light on the wisdom of the past. The citation on the certificate that I'm about to present to Susan Schreiner reads as follows: engaging advisor, brilliant lecturer, and creative scholar, Susan Schreiner has cast new and profound light on the Renaissance and the Reformation. Her dedication to teaching and her keen wit have evoked enduring admiration and friendship from her students. So, before we depart, I'd like to take the opportunity, the privilege, to address a few words to you, whom we have the honor to recognize today, as you stand on the threshold of a new phase of your lives. Anthropologists call such moments liminal, from the Latin limen, threshold, and the great University of Chicago anthropologist Victor Turner dedicated his life to studying ceremonies of the limen, of the liminal. Rituals of, he called them, betwixt and between. And we are currently in such a ceremony today. It's a highly formal performance marked by ceremonial entry into and exit from a quasi-sacred space. I should just say sacred. Swift Hall is sacred, not quasi-sacred. Repetition of ritual formulas, and of course, the wearing of liturgical vestments. Those vestments, and indeed many aspects of this ritual, have roots stretching down to the Middle Ages, Wilhelminachtens and my favorite period. Your gowns, hoods, caps, tassels, and titles all have accumulated meaning over the centuries. Some of that meaning you've already heard expressed when in the formula invoked over each of you today, welcoming you to membership in an ancient and honorable company of scholars. Today's ceremonies do not merely transfer to you a transcript or a professional credential, they usher you into a community. That community includes everyone who has ever, from when universities first appeared in the 12th century until today, everyone who has ever experienced the discipline of a faculty, sometimes a severe discipline to be sure, and emerged with a degree of master or doctor. Of course, not all of those degrees have been from the University of Chicago. Just the best ones. But all have shared the common ideal of subjecting opinion, prejudice, authority, dogma, and expedience to the test of critical thought. As you know, that test is not an easy one. The ancient Greeks used to say that one must suffer into learning. It rhymes in Greek, pathein, mathein. Many resources, material, intellectual, emotional, are required to join this honorable company. One among those many resources is time, by which I mean not only the considerable time it takes to get an advanced degree, but more importantly, the special sensibility towards time that the kind of thinking you have been doing these past years requires. The ability to set aside the constant calls of the world around us, to step out of the demands of the immediate present, and to dwell in the longer term of an impossibly complex field and an impossibly difficult problem. Today's ceremony marks your departure from a special space of thought, a space in which even the architecture constantly reminds us that the time scales of our inquiry and research are somehow different from those of the everyday world. There's a reason why Gothic is the architecture of so many universities. No matter what road you take, when you process out of these doors in a moment, you will enter a world whose clocks tick to a different rhythm, a world where the rumbling of the present feels louder and sometimes threatens to fill the space of thought. I don't want to delay your entry into the world any longer, but as you enter it, I remind you only of the obligation that comes with being part of our ancient and honorable company. You, your families, your faculty, indeed society as a whole, have all made enormous sacrifices so that you could step outside of time and gain the power to question and, if necessary, to transform the convictions and the certainties of the present about religion. As you step out of today's ritual and back into the flow of worldly time, wearing your medieval gowns, mortarboards, and hoods, your obligation is never to forget that power and to use it whenever and wherever the world needs it most. As for me, it's not my obligation, but rather my honor, my privilege, and my joy to thank you for having chosen to join with us in our community of inquiry, to congratulate you on behalf of the Divinity School and the University of Chicago, and to lead our procession back into a world that awaits and desperately needs you. Thank you. Congratulations. Good luck.